Welcome to New York's number two sports show. JT Miller is a New York Ranger again. Rangers acquired JT Miller from the Vancouver Canucks in a deal that includes Filip Chytil going to Vancouver, as well as Victor Mancini and a first round pick in 2025 that is top 13 protected. So if the Rangers make the playoffs, then that pick will go to Vancouver this year. If they don't, and it's within those top 13, then it'll be an unprotected. The Rangers will keep that pick and it'll be unprotected in 2026. So definitely interesting as far as how that'll go. So there's a little bit of a sweet spot where they could miss the playoffs and that pick would go to Vancouver. If it's from 14 through 16, then it would go to the Canucks. Rangers also acquire a couple of defensemen in the deal. Erik Brannstrom, who originally was drafted by Vegas. He was in the Mark Stone trade that sent Brannstrom to Ottawa, and now he was on Vancouver. I think he's going to be on the NHL roster. We'll discuss that. He had been in the AHL recently with Abbotsford. And then defensive prospect Jackson Dorrington, who is a sixth-round pick by the Canucks in 2022, currently playing at Northeastern. Let's get into the real nitty-gritty of this. JT Miller back, and he, 5 more years on his deal, $8 million, and it is all inclusive, no retention on the part of the Vancouver Canucks. There were issues in the locker room in Vancouver between JT Miller and Elias Pettersson. And, the writing was on the wall that they were trying to get rid of Miller, and there weren't that many suitors for him. At least it appears that way. I mean, JT Miller had a no movement clause. So he had a little bit of control, more than a little bit of control as far as where his destination was going to be. And he lands back with the Rangers. And so my thoughts on this, and again, there's a lot to discuss here. I like JT Miller, the player, and what he could bring, his style of play that the Rangers do sorely lack, which is someone in the top six that is going to provide a little bit of grit and physicality. And Miller really, really took off with the Vancouver Canucks. Like, this is someone that really does slot in probably as your number one center. And the only reason why I question is just it'll be interesting to see the combinations, right? Like, I think what I'd be curious to see, hey, like, let's really kind of try some new things. Like, maybe JT Miller with Artemi Panarin could be an interesting combination. Like, maybe you do break up that Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere line. So now your three centers are Miller, Trocheck, and Zibanejad, which is definitely a much different look than what we're accustomed to. Miller, it's been a little bit of a struggle this season. Again, with all he took a leave of absence. This trade was inevitable. So this year, 35 points in 40 games, only 9 goals, 26 assists. So definitely his worst year in Vancouver to date. I guess to bring it all the way back, Miller was a first-round pick by the Rangers in 2011, the 15th overall pick. And what's interesting is Zibanejad, Miller, and Trocheck are all part of that 2011 draft. Zibanejad was, I believe, a top 5 pick by Ottawa. He was either picked like 5th or 6th, somewhere around there. And then Miller was 15th, and Vincent Trocheck was early 3rd round by Florida. Now, it's believed, that Miller and Trocheck are good friends. So that's another interesting thing as far as dynamics go. So hopefully there's some camaraderie there. And the thing is that Miller was teammates with Chris Kreider and Mika Zibanejad as well. So they're used to him. So as far as all the locker room issues that he had in Vancouver, look, I think that for now, I think that he can bring a little bit more juice and demand more of his teammates, which I think they need. I think that this locker room is a little bit too nice, and Miller can bring that edge that they don't have. So Miller, who, in some ways, like he was 2 drafts after Chris Kreider. So, Kreider came up before he did. But it's funny, I remember Miller, who made his debut in the 2013 season, and I think he scored in his first game against the Islanders, if memory serves me correct. So he was there under Tortorella and then Vigneault. But Miller actually, funny enough, made the team the year the Rangers made it to the Cup final, Miller made the team and Kreider didn't. However, I believe about a week or two in, Kreider ended up having like really his first true full NHL season, and Miller had more of a reserve role. He played a few, he only played 30 regular season games. He played a few games in the playoffs, but not a whole lot. Miller really takes on a much bigger role the next year. The year the Rangers won the President's Trophy, the year they lost to the Lightning in the conference final, where Miller plays 58 games, 23 points. Again, he's not playing much, but Miller really makes his mark in the playoffs. And the numbers don't jump out at you, but JT Miller really did not put up great postseason numbers with the Rangers or even with the Lightning for that matter. But I would say that his best one was probably 2015, where he plays 19 games, only 1 goal, 7 assists, and 8 points. And then I would say we're really, it kind of gradually gets better, I guess. It was a slow build for him. 2016, he plays all 82 games, 43 points. And then 2017, and also 82 games, 56 points, and a plus 17. So, like, he's really getting better and better come 16 and 17. Then 18, the Rangers take a step back. I wouldn't say he was much worse, really, than he was before that. And I should also mention JT Miller in his career with the Rangers was primarily on the wing. He was drafted as a center. I remember that, but it was a little bit of a mix. But I remember him more, again, playing. He can really do left wing or right wing. But Miller, 17, 18, this is the year of the letter. And this is that really, really bad trade with the Tampa Bay Lightning, where Ryan McDonagh and JT Miller are dealt. Miller played 63 games with the Rangers that year at 40 points. And that was the kicker, was adding Miller into the deal. McDonagh was more understandable at the time, but the Miller thing was tough. And apparently, again, there were maybe some locker room concerns. Nothing that I believe was necessarily tangible, but that was kind of the overwhelming thought. And what was unfortunate there was that Alain Vigneault was fired at the end of the season. It would have been interesting to see JT Miller just with a new regime and what would have ended up being David Quinn. So Miller goes to Tampa and sees initial success. Really, he's in 19 games, he has 18 points, which is a much better, point per game clip than he had ever had with the Rangers. But then, in a lesser role in 2018, 2019 with Tampa, 75 games, 47 points. Not bad, but really it was kind of what he was doing with the Rangers. He didn't really do what he did the prior year, despite the fact this is a really good Tampa team. So he was only averaging 14 minutes and 40 seconds a night. And so he is traded from Tampa to Vancouver, which lessens the overall blow in terms of like, look, I wish that he had stayed as a Ranger at the time, but it even took him getting traded from Tampa. Now, granted, Tampa, obviously, they had a lot of good players. There was cap constraints. But the best thing that ever happened for JT Miller was him going from Tampa to Vancouver. And I believe when he was traded from Tampa was when the Lightning, again, they had an amazing season and got swept by Columbus. And so one of the moves they make is, again, dealing him to Vancouver, where he absolutely takes off really immediately. So he was there before COVID, the 1920 season, 69 games, 72 points. And really performed very, very well in the bubble for Vancouver. We had a nice little run, and JT Miller was a huge part of that. I mean, he was playing 20 minutes a night. Very, very good as a Canuck through and through. Really takes a big step up in the 2022 season. 80 games played, 99 points. So that's like by far his best season, but it would actually get a little bit better, I would say, definitely. The next year, 81 games, 82 points. And then last season, 81 games, he reaches 103 points, a plus 32. And again, another good postseason where we didn't really see that with the Rangers in Tampa. He was not someone that necessarily performed in the playoffs, but he did, again, in the bubble, but even more so, I would say, last year. Despite the fact they lost to Edmonton in a really tough 7-game series, he played well. And he was well liked by Vancouver fans. This year, it was a bit of a disaster. And, clearly Miller off the ice issues, it's a thing, right? Like the sample size is high enough where clearly it's a thing, but excited to have him back. Philosophically, it's tough, right? Because he is 31 now. He's got 5 more years left in his deal after this. $8 million cap hit, fully on the books for the Rangers. The good news is today it was announced that the salary cap is going up exponentially. So it's going to soften the blow in the later years. That is relevant and good. But the Rangers really, to me, should, if it were me, I would be in more of a seller's mode. I don't think that they're one JT Miller away from winning the cup. Could this catapult them into the playoffs? Certainly it could. And again, JT Miller is someone that I am a fan of. So, but it's just kind of ironic how the Rangers, and this will kind of lead me into Filip Chytil, and then we'll kind of work our way back to some of the other pieces the Rangers acquired in this trade. But where JT Miller was traded as a young player at the letter when the Rangers were in sell mode. And the guy that comes in as one of the new pieces was first round draft pick Filip Chytil. So there was, I guess, a slight bit of overlap between those two. I guess they actually were technically teammates. Filip Chytil was there for very briefly in the 17-18 season under Vigneault. So Filip Chytil, until this trade, was the third longest tenured Ranger behind Kreider and Zibanejad. And then Miller develops into this amazing player, and now the Rangers trade away who was one of the young pieces in Chytil. Just, again, in terms of asset management and the way that all turned out, not exactly great. It would have been more ideal if somehow Miller could have done this with the Rangers. That probably wasn't going to be possible. He needed to go elsewhere to become what he became. But again, it kind of reminds me a little bit of when the Rangers reacquired Alexei Kovalev, but a little bit different. I mean, Kovalev won a cup with the Rangers in what was, I think, maybe his second season, but Kovalev got really good at the Rangers trading away to Pittsburgh. And the Rangers got him back. And at that point, it was, a last-ditch effort type deal to make the playoffs, which they didn't make. And Kovalev was gone pretty soon thereafter. So it's a little bit different. Miller here, the thought is that he's going to be a Ranger potentially for the rest of his career. Usually doesn't work out like that. But there is certainly a chance that does happen. So Filip Chytil. And it's sad to see him go, really a likable guy, wishing him well with the Canucks. Chytil was a 21st overall pick in 2017. So this was, the Rangers had just made the playoffs, but things were changing a little bit. The Rangers had traded, really that day, I believe, it was Derek Stepan to the Coyotes. They got back I think the Rangers got back Tony DeAngelo, and within that, they acquired the first round pick from then Arizona Coyotes. And they drafted Lias Anderson, who ended up being a total bust. What ended up being really the prize of that draft was Filip Chytil. And the Rangers drafted very poorly in those years, right? There was some good stuff in the mix as well, right? Keandre Miller is included in that, but Vitaly Kravtsov was not good. We can even talk, Kaapo Kakko, for being a number 2 overall pick, was overall a disappointment, although that's another conversation. But Filip Chytil was a good Ranger. And I think that the big thing here is major health concerns, right? He's really one big hit away, or not even a big hit, just one hit away from his career being over. That is very much on the table here. And so selfishly, it's that is something that you always worry about with him. He's a fragile player and has had a lot of concussion problems. So it kind of brings his value down a little bit. But he provides a ton of speed. And we'll talk about Chytil's career as a Ranger, but Chytil brings a lot of speed to a Ranger team that doesn't really have much of it. Now they lose that. So again, the Rangers, they are getting older and they're not a very speedy team. But with Chytil, he came up again in Vigneault's last year, played the first couple games, then I think he came back towards the end. And really from there, he's, again, third longest tenured Ranger. And with him, the stats don't jump out at you. Really, he had one season where, he didn't have any years above 23 points except 1 year, which was 22-23. Gerard Gallant's second and last year as head coach, 74 games, 45 points. But that's a little bit misleading. There were other good, his points per game, and he never really got that much ice time. Filip Chytil, in looking back at it, this, it's funny actually. He got a good amount of ice time in the 1920 season, 14 minutes and 50 seconds. But it kind of got dialed back in 21 and in 22. He really was, Filipino was always kind of the third line center. Despite that, even like last season, there was a chance for him to take that leap as a second line center, but it never quite happened. He was mostly on the second power play unit. You can argue that, like with Vancouver, he could certainly get a lot more playing time and could really thrive. Kind of somewhat similar to Capo Caco. Chytil is an offensive driven center, right? He is not very good defensively. He's not good on faceoffs, but a fun player to watch and someone that really performed well in the playoffs, at least in the 2022 run. Like that kid line, which is crazy. It's only one guy left in Alexis Lafreniere, but he'll put up 7 goals in those 20 games, which was very good when you consider. I think one of his worst regular seasons was that 21-22 season, Jorgeland's first year. Chytil was a healthy scratch at certain points. It just was not good, but he really picked it up. He kind of carried what he did in that playoffs into that 22-23 season. And he was on his way. He really he cooled down by the end of that season. He was on his way. There was a chance that maybe he could flirt with 30 goals that year. It didn't happen. He had 22. But then, and I guess I'm skipping over some things early in his career that aren't really that important. He was kind of up and down at one point. Like I think it was that 1920 season where they sent him to Hartford and he came back up and he was really effective and good and gained David Quinn's trust at that point. But last year, they start him out with Artemi Panarin and he gets concussed and he was out until he came back in the playoffs, which was a pleasant surprise, but he wasn't the same player. So he only played 10 games in the regular season last season. And again, just wasn't the same. I think he returned in the Carolinas. I think he, played in parts of the Carolina and Florida series, but wasn't himself. This year, he was good. I mean, 41 games, 11 goals, 9 assists, 20 points, +4. I thought his line with Cooley and Kakko was very good, but he is what he is, Chytil. He's someone that he can take the puck from end to end. And can give you some highlight reel moments, but at the same time, there's limitations to his game. Again, he's not great along the boards. For a center, he's more of a shoot-first player, which is something that the Rangers do lack a bit. But regardless of the fact, Canucks are getting a player in Filip Chytil. His contract situation was a little shy of $4.5 million per season for 2 more years after this. So Miller's contract runs 3 more years than Chytil, but Rangers are losing just a little more than $3.5 million in this. So not like a crazy amount. Rangers still have a pretty good amount of cap space as far as the deadline's concerned. Still a pretty sizable amount. So from there, Victor Mancini, he is traded in this as well. So there was high hopes for Mancini, who made the team, surprisingly, out of camp, and deserved it too, and played 15 games with the Rangers and had 1 goal, 3 assists. 1 goal, 4 assists, and 5 points, -3. And again, you saw potential there. And I think that he might have been in their future plans. But when you think about it, with the Rangers signing Will Borgen to a contract extension, which, look, we could argue is the right or wrong move, the right side is pretty filled up with Fox, Mancini, and Schneider. And look, the Rangers could move Schneider to the left side. That's possible. I kind of thought that maybe that would happen. It still might. And that Mancini would slide in as that third pair right defenseman. That's not the case. And so it'll be interesting to see what he does. Kind of a success story in the fact that he was a 5th-round pick in 2022, and there's a lot of promise for him. And we'll see. I don't know the Vancouver roster well enough to know if he's going to get a shot right away or if they're going to have him play in Abbotsford, the AHL affiliate of the Canucks. But he is going to Vancouver. And then as well, that first-round pick, top 13 protected. So again, if the Rangers finish 13th or worse, then they will keep the pick and then it will become unprotected next season, which is kind of scary, that could occur. It's almost as if, I guess, best case scenario in some ways. Well, either way, best case scenario is the Rangers doing really well. Either season, then Vancouver gets a late round pick. That's what you're hoping for overall. But it'll be interesting to see where it lands. And top 13 was very specific. I wonder the permutations and why they did it that way. But as far as what's better, you can look at it a couple of ways, but really the Rangers making the playoffs is the best thing because it just moves that pick, all the way down. What would be kind of unfortunate, I guess, is if it lands in that 14 to 16 spot where the Rangers don't make the playoffs and still have to relinquish the pick. But at least at that point, it would only be a mid-round pick. We'll see. But that is a big thing, and I don't like trading the first round picks when you can avoid it. That is just not what I want this team doing. And that's exactly what's happening. Again, the protection on it makes it a little bit more bearable, but still, I don't like it. And now the Rangers, as far as the other players they got in the deal, Erik Brannstrom, like I had said, now with him, because he has to go through waivers, I guess the expectation is that he will be on the NHL club. He was just in AHL for Vancouver, but I don't know if it works that way where you can just go straight to AHL. I think he would be with the NHL team, which then, if that's the case, the Rangers would have one extra player. They would have to make a move. And I wouldn't think that it would be waiving Brannstrom. I guess that's in play. Zach Jones is something like, I think the days of Zach Jones as a Ranger are long over. It's just like, when is the exit? I don't think they'd want to waive him, though. I still think that they would want to at least, get rid of him in a trade so they can get something for him. So there's that. And I'll bring up Jimmy Vesey just because it came out that, and I'm not that surprised. Like, Vesey has not played in a while. I think it's, I don't know, 10 straight games he's been healthy scratch, something like that. And so he expressed, his disappointment to Larry Brooks. And so, could Jimmy Vesey be waived to get, Brannstrom onto the roster? It's possible. Again, like, that'll be interesting. And I do say that not knowing for sure that Brannstrom is automatically has to be part of this NHL active roster. We'll see. But if he is, then there's another move following up that needs to be made. With him, he's mid-20s, I think 25. And you're kind of hoping that maybe it can be like an Urho Vakanainen situation where, there's always been some promise. Like, both were first-round picks. And, Vakanainen's been serviceable with the Rangers. And with Brannstrom, he's been up and down with Vancouver this season. He had some all right years with Ottawa. I mean, ultimately, it was kind of not a success because he was pretty highly touted. But we'll see how they utilize him. I don't really see much of a role for him now, but maybe things will change, right? Like, if Zach Jones didn't get a chance, in theory, Brannstrom should have a tough time as well. And then Jackson Dorrington, I believe is his name. I think he was a 6th-round pick by Vancouver in 2022. So I guess a little bit after Victor Mancini was drafted by the Rangers. So again, he's playing currently in Northeastern. I have seen some things where there is some like that he could be something. Again, like, chances are in these situations, it's kind of a lotto, a lottery ticket type thing. But it'd be nice if somehow Dorrington can enter the equation as a potential futures option. So you can't completely ignore the Brannstrom Dorrington parts of this deal, but really the big part of it, is JT Miller, Filip Chytil. I'll say Victor Mancini, but also that first-round pick is obviously really, really critical. And the fact that the Miller contract is being fully, it's the money is fully on the Rangers on this one. No salary retention coming from Vancouver. So JT Miller, we'll see how things go. He's going to be actually part of the Four Nations tournament as well. So now that makes it 4 Rangers on that USA squad. And I wonder, just a little kind of lesser important note, what will JT Miller's number be? He was number 10 with the Rangers back in the day, but that's currently occupied by Artemi Panarin. He was number 9 with Vancouver, which has been retired. Andy Bathgate and Adam Graves being those number 9s that were retired. And I don't know, like, we'll see. Not a big deal, but just kind of interesting. I think JT Miller, when he first came up, originally, I think he might have been number 47. I wouldn't think that he'd go there, but again, here nor there. A really, really big trade between the Rangers and Canucks, one that seemed like it was almost going to happen. What was it, I guess, a couple weeks ago that got scrapped, and they re-entered negotiations, and here we are. So I think it's a deal that makes sense for both teams. But again, I don't like the fact that the Rangers, this was a win now trade. It makes this season way more interesting, and I think it increases their playoff chances. But at the same time, like, down the road, this is a Ranger team that really is getting older and older. It's got to be, I think, up there. If you were to do average ages of all NHL teams, Rangers got to be, one of the higher ones. So another kid, not kid anymore, I guess, but is dealt away in Filip Chytil, right? Just like we saw with Capo Caco, and JT Miller makes his way back to the Rangers. The hope is that he will be in the lineup for tomorrow's late afternoon game in Boston. So, and then he'll make his return as a Ranger to Madison Square Garden Sunday night against the Vegas Golden Knights. A lot going on. Chris Drury has been very active this season, and the Ranger team continues to evolve, and I don't expect that to change this season and going into the offseason, depending on how the Rangers do the rest of the way. 5 games left until that Four Nations break, and it'll be a race to the finish. And now the Rangers have JT Miller back as they acquire him from the Vancouver Canucks.